Hey guys, tonight we aren't marching into battle or standing in the grand halls of a palace. We're sinking into the cracks beneath a city's surface, into the damp basements, shuttered storefronts, and flickering gaslight of Seattle's Chinatown in 1897. You're not a villain, not a rebel, not even a criminal in the way you might imagine. You're just tired, broke, forgotten, and slowly, quietly dissolving into smoke. Tonight, you're an opium addict, the kind the city pretends not to see until it needs a scapegoat. You didn't plan to end up here, but grief is heavy, pain is expensive, and the pipe is quiet. You probably won't survive this. The odds are stacked so high against you, they cast a shadow over the entire city. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always find it strangely comforting to know who else is out there, drifting off to these quiet collapses, so feel free to post your location and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Seattle by rail, not in a passenger car with plush seats and wide windows, but wedged between crates in the back of a freight car that smells of mildew and old potatoes. You're broke and bruised, a leftover from somewhere else, a loose thread pulled from the fabric of the East. You drop from the train with a grunt, your boots hitting the gravel with a sound that's too final for a new beginning. You start walking, not toward any specific destination, but simply toward wherever the streets look less judgmental. It isn't your first time arriving somewhere with nothing but the clothes on your back and a hole in your pocket. You've done this dance before. Step off the train. Keep your head down. Find a boarding house that'll take IOUs and a promise of work. But this time is different. This time, your right leg aches with every single step, a souvenir from a railroad injury that never healed properly, a constant grinding reminder of a snapped cable and a foreman's scream. And there's a tightness in your chest that feels like failure curling in for the night, a permanent resident in the space where ambition used to be. Seattle is loud in a way that doesn't feel like life. It's more like metal grinding against stone. Steam whistles shriek from the harbor, streetcars screech as they take sharp corners, and men shout prices in accents from all over the world. You weave through the chaos with your duffel slung over one shoulder and your hands jammed deep in your pockets, a futile attempt to keep them warm and still. Everything smells like coal smoke and fish guts, a perfume the city wears with a certain grimy pride. It's growing fast, everyone says. A boom town, they call it, thanks to timber fortunes, rumors of gold in the Klondike, and railroad money pouring in from the east like a river of greed. But it's not a town made for lingering. The streets slope too sharply, as if trying to spill you into the sea. The windows of the new brick buildings look too clean, reflecting a sky you can't quite see. And every man walking briskly past you, with his starched collar and determined stride, seems to already know where he belongs. You don't. You try the job office first, because that's what men like you are supposed to do. It's part of the ritual of starting over. The clerk doesn't even look up when you step inside, the little bell above the door announcing your presence with a pathetic jingle. He just points a stained finger at a board with cards tacked to it, most of them already crossed out or torn away. "There's work out at the docks," he mutters, his voice as grey as the city sky. If you can swing a hook with one hand and balance on a busted knee, you nod as if you'll actually think it over, a silent performance for an audience of one. But you don't go. You're tired of proving things to strangers who have already sized you up and found you wanting. Tired of the casual cruelty of men who hold all the cards. Instead, you drift. You find yourself in the alleys behind the general stores, where crates are stacked like precarious altars to commerce. Smells drift out of the kitchens of restaurants you're not welcome in. You catch the faint, unfamiliar scents of frying garlic, sesame oil, and something fermented and sweet. Not bad, just different. This is Chinatown, they call it, though no one seems to agree on where it actually begins or ends. It bleeds into the rest of the city, a neighborhood defined not by maps, but by the faces of its residents and the language on its signs. The characters are a beautiful, incomprehensible mystery to you. But the pace is slower here, quieter. There's less yelling, fewer eyes watching your limp with open suspicion. You find a stack of bricks outside a shuttered storefront and sit for a moment, pressing a hand into your coat pocket where your last few coins rattle together like loose teeth. It's a lonely sound. There are reasons a man ends up in a place like this, a city on the edge of the continent. Some come running west because they've heard stories about jobs that pay in gold and women who don't ask too many questions. Others come running from something. A collapsed bank in a town you'll never see again, a failed harvest that turned your farm to dust, a funeral you couldn't afford to attend. You don't remember which category you fall into anymore. The reasons have blurred together, eroded by time and distance. You only remember the job in Montana that ended with a snapped cable and a screaming foreman whose face you can no longer picture. You remember waking up in a boarding house in Spokane with 2 fewer teeth and no boots. And you remember the ache that started in your spine and crawled up your side until it took up residence behind your ribs, beating like a second malevolent heart. The kind of deep, gnawing pain no doctor fixes. The kind that just waits. The 1890s were supposed to be a time of progress, but they were good for somebody else, not for you. The panic of '93 swept through the country like a fever, and you were already weak when it hit. The railroads stopped hiring. The timber mills dried up. Every town between Chicago and the Pacific grew suspicious of strangers, of men with no work and hungry eyes. Labor unions marched in the streets. Companies struck back with hired thugs, and men like you got caught in the middle. Too sick to do the hard labor, too proud to beg, too white to be turned away outright, but too dirty to be welcomed. You're not the only one, of course. You've passed others sleeping in doorways or huddled behind barrels in alleyways, their faces etched with the same story of displacement. But the difference between seeing them and being one of them is a single bad week. And you've just had 3. Your cough started somewhere in Idaho, maybe before. At first, it was just a tickle, dust in the lungs from the freight cars. Then it became a wet, rattling sound that brought up specks of blood on your handkerchief. Now, it's the kind of deep, hacking cough that turns heads in a quiet room. You try to hide it when you can, muffling it in the crook of your arm, but there's only so much you can do with hands that have started to shake. You haven't eaten since yesterday morning, half a heel of stale bread and something pickled you don't want to name. You pawned your good gloves in Tacoma for a few cents, your leather belt in Olympia for a drink you barely tasted, and your pride somewhere back in Missoula, though you can't remember exactly where. These things have a way of falling out of your pockets when you're not looking. By the time the sun starts its slow, greasy slide behind the hills, you're limping along a street that doesn't seem to end. Your stomach growls in protest, a hollow, aching complaint, but the pain in your chest wins the argument. You pause beside a laundromat where steam curls from the roof vents like ghostly fingers. You sit on the edge of the curb, watching your breath fog in the damp, chilly air. Your head is light, your fingers numb. For a fleeting moment, you think about just lying down right there on the cold bricks, curling up and letting the city keep walking past you. Just letting go. But then someone speaks from behind you, not in anger or warning, but in a voice that's something quieter, softer. Need a place to rest? You turn slowly. Every movement an effort. A man stands in the doorway of a shop with shuttered windows. His face is half lit by a gas lamp burning somewhere behind him. He's older than you by a decade, maybe more. His clothes are plain but neat, a dark jacket over a simple shirt. His accent is lightly touched with something you can't place. Maybe Chinese, maybe Hawaiian, maybe just tired. You nod slowly, too exhausted to form words. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't frown either. His expression is neutral, unreadable. He just gestures with 2 fingers, a subtle beckoning motion, and turns back inside, leaving the door ajar. You hesitate for only a second before pushing yourself to your feet and following him into the shadows. The stairs creak under your weight as you follow the man down into the earth. He doesn't speak, and you don't ask questions. The wood beneath your feet feels damp, swollen from years of Seattle's persistent rain and wear, and the air grows thicker, warmer, the deeper you go. It's humid and sweet in a way that makes your nose sting, and cloying, unfamiliar perfume. You brush past a faded, heavy curtain at the bottom of the stairs and step into a room that isn't quite dark, but dim enough that it takes your eyes a moment to adjust. The only light comes from a lamp in the corner, its flame burning low behind amber-colored glass, flickering gently and casting long, dancing shadows across the space. For a moment, all you can see are those shadows and the shapes they conceal. You were expecting a cot, maybe a spare blanket on the floor, something simple, plain, and functional. The kind of corner where a man down on his luck might lie down for a few hours without being asked what he did to get there. But this room is different. There are no bunks, no tidy rows of bedding, no sounds of shallow snoring or whispered conversations. Instead, the space is cluttered with thin straw mats and worn, flat pillows. Bodies are curled loosely across the floor like discarded coats, scattered in a way that seems random but probably isn't. The air hums faintly with the collective heat and breath of the room's occupants, and something sharper underneath it all, a smell you can't quite place. Not rot, not incense, not food, but something sweet and dark that fills the lungs like warm syrup. No one looks up as you enter. No one acknowledges you at all. You take a hesitant step forward and hear the soft crunch of something under your boot. Maybe a crumb of ash, maybe something else. There's a low table near the center of the room, its surface scratched and ringed with old water stains. A few small ceramic bowls rest on it beside an oil lamp, and next to them, what looks like a flattened, sticky bundle of black tar. A narrow pipe, long and delicate with a ceramic bowl, lies beside it, faintly glinting in the lamplight. You glance back toward the man who led you down, but he's already turned away, moving through the room as if he's part of it, checking on a dozing form here, lighting a wick there, offering nothing that resembles an instruction or a welcome. You don't know what kind of place this is exactly, but the rules are clear enough without being spoken. No one's here to talk. No one wants company. They've all come here to leave something behind. A pain, a memory, a version of themselves they couldn't afford to carry for one more day. You find an empty corner near the back and lower yourself onto a mat. The stuffing is uneven and smells faintly sour, the fabric gone thin and shiny from too many nights of sweat and shifting limbs. You sit stiffly at first, your bad knee throbbing from the descent down the stairs, your back pressed hard against the damp wall. The sweet, heavy smell is in your clothes now, in your hair. You try to breathe shallowly, but it's everywhere. There's an older man lying just a few feet away, wrapped in a threadbare coat that might once have been military issue. He has a sailor's tattoo, a faded anchor, on his forearm and a hollowed-out look in his cheeks, as if he's been emptying himself out for years. His eyes flutter open briefly when you shift on the mat, but they don't focus on you. They're looking at something far away, or maybe at nothing at all. He just sighs, a long, slow release of air, and closes them again. Further in, near the center of the room, you spot a woman dressed in morning black, her gloved hands folded neatly over her stomach as she lies motionless, her face turned toward the ceiling. You see white men, Chinese men, men you can't place at all. None of them are young, and none of them are talking. One man lets out a slow, rasping cough from behind a makeshift partition. No one reacts. It's just another sound in the room's quiet symphony. You don't mean to stay. You tell yourself that more than once. This is just a place to sit, to rest the leg, to warm your hands before you face the cold street again. You lean your head back against the wall and close your eyes, just for a moment. The low hum of the room settles around you like a heavy blanket, and beneath it, there's a rhythm. The scratch of a match being struck, the soft, wet bubble of resin melting over a flame, the hollow clink of something ceramic against something wooden. Someone shifts on their mat. Another exhales a long, slow breath. You start to lose track of how long you've been there. 5 minutes? 20? An hour? Time feels slow and thick here, like trying to walk through syrup in a dream. Eventually, someone approaches. You don't see him at first, but you hear the soft pad of bare feet on the wooden floor and the muffled clink of tin. A man kneels beside the low table, his movements steady, practiced, economical. He wears a pale shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, his forearms marked with faint, old scars. He doesn't look at you. He just leans over the lamp and pinches off a small piece of the black resin, rolling it gently between his thumb and forefinger before heating it on the end of a long, fine pin. The smell thickens as it bubbles and smokes, pungent and burnt sweet, like molasses being charred on an iron skillet. He packs the molten bead carefully into the bowl of the long pipe, turns it once in the flame, and then holds it out. He doesn't speak. He just offers it. The pipe hangs there in the dim space between you. It's not an invitation exactly, but it's not a command either. It's just a continuation of the room's rhythm, and you are now part of it. You hesitate, your hands still lying uselessly in your lap. You don't know the ritual. You don't know if you're supposed to bow, to pay, to whisper something first. But the man makes no sign of impatience. He just waits, his expression as placid as a still pond. You reach out. Your hand is shaking slightly. The stem of the pipe is warm, smooth, and lighter than it looks. You fumble with it for a second, trying to mimic what you've seen others do, but your fingers are clumsy and cold. He leans in without a word and holds the flame of the lamp to the bowl for you. You draw in the smoke as best you can. It's shallow at first, then deeper. The taste surprises you. It's not acrid or bitter like you expected from the smell of cheap tobacco. It's oddly soft, sweet, and woody, with a sharp bite that catches only at the very end, a little sting in the back of your throat. You hold it in your lungs longer than you should, then let out a single sharp cough, embarrassed by the noise. No one notices. The man takes the pipe back without comment, already preparing another one for someone else. You lean your head back against the wall again and let the feeling wash through you. It doesn't hit you like liquor, which makes the world spin and your tongue thick. It doesn't numb you like the laudanum you tried once, which just turned the world to grey cotton. It doesn't punch or drop or spin you around. It just softens everything. The sharp edges of the world begin to blur. The grinding pain in your leg eases into a dull, distant throb. The tightness in your chest loosens its grip. Your hands stop shaking. Even your thoughts seem to slow down, unfurling like smoke in warm, still air. You can still feel the cold of the world outside this room, the hunger in your belly, the failure clinging to your coat, but it's all distant now. It's like it's happening to someone else, someone you used to know. You understand, without knowing how you know, that this is what the others came for. Not escape, not euphoria, just this, just relief. You close your eyes. You don't dream. You don't move. The warmth soaks into your bones and quiets the part of you that was always calculating. How many meals you had left, how far you could walk before your leg gave out, which town might take you in next. None of that matters here. No one in this room is worried about tomorrow. Most of them aren't even worried about now. You stay like that for what could be 10 minutes or an hour, suspended in a warm, quiet haze. But eventually, the smoke starts to fade from your lungs, and the ache begins to return, creeping back in slowly, insistently, like a bill coming due. You reach into your coat pocket instinctively, but your fingers close around nothing but lint. The last of your coins went earlier, spent on that stale bread and a night in a flop house you don't even remember. You glance around the room, unsure of what to do next. The man in the rolled-up sleeves is passing by again, setting down a new pipe for someone, checking on the sailor who's begun to shiver in his sleep. He pauses near you. He says nothing. He just looks down at your feet. It takes you a second to understand the silent transaction. Then you do. Your boots. They come off with difficulty. The laces are stiff with dirt and damp, the leather cracked and worn. You set them on the floor beside your mat and lean back again, trying not to feel the sudden vulnerability of being shoeless, the cold of the floorboards seeping into your socks. The man picks them up. He doesn't check the size, he doesn't inspect the wear and tear. He just nods once, a quick, barely perceptible motion, and moves on. You sit there in your socks, the floor cool beneath you, a fresh wave of shame washing over you before the memory of the smoke pushes it away. A new pipe appears beside you a few minutes later, warm and ready. You take it without speaking. This time, it doesn't feel like a decision. It just feels like the natural next step in a night that stopped asking you for reasons a long time ago. You leave the den just long enough to scrape together enough coin for a return visit. A pawned pocket knife you'd carried for years. 2 miserable hours hauling crates down by the docks until your lungs rattle with every breath and your leg finally gives out completely. It's never much money, but it's enough. Enough to buy a few more hours of stillness. Enough to stop the frantic ache behind your eyes. And once you know the way back, once you understand what waits for you in the quiet and the dark, you find yourself going again and again. There are things you learn quickly in the den, and things no one ever says aloud. The place isn't a home or a shelter or a business in any formal sense. It's more like a tide pool, quiet, enclosed, just deep enough to hold what's been left behind by the larger, more turbulent world outside. The rules here aren't written down on any wall, but they're everywhere, woven into the floorboards and the flickering shadows. You learn them not by instruction, but by observation, by watching what the others do and, more importantly, what they don't. For example, you learn that you don't speak unless you are spoken to, and even then, you keep your words brief and to the point. You don't ask for names, and you don't offer your own. You don't touch anyone unless they're convulsing or so still for so long that you suspect they might be dead. You don't step over a man who's lying on the floor. You always go around. You don't light your own pipe unless you brought it from somewhere else. And even then, you wait until the room is quiet and the keeper has made his rounds. You never ever complain about the quality of the resin. You never try to bargain on your second visit. And you never ever ask where the owner is. The room seems to run itself, and you quickly realize that's the entire point. Most nights, it's the same man at the low table, an older Chinese man with a faded blue jacket and a limp that almost matches yours. But his is slower, more resigned. He doesn't speak much, not even in his own tongue, though sometimes you hear him mutter softly to himself as he mixes the opium paste, a sound that isn't quite a prayer, but something rhythmic and private. He tends the lamps, checks on the mats, sweeps the ashes from the floor with a small woven broom, and sets the prepared pipes down with the quiet reverence of someone tending shrines in a temple. No one calls him by name. You aren't sure if anyone even knows it. But on the rare nights when he's not there, the room feels wrong. Too still, too hollow, like a church with the altar stripped bare. The people come and go in a rhythm that's never quite the same, but always feels familiar. There are the nightly regulars, pale-faced and hollow-eyed men who never seem to be fully awake, even when they're sitting up. They drift in like ghosts and settle onto their usual mats without a word. There are the sailors, mostly white men, who arrive in twos or threes, loud and boisterous for the first 5 minutes, full of stories about other ports, and then utterly silent for the rest of the night. There are the widows, not many of them, but enough to be noticeable. They always wear dark, respectable dresses with stiff collars and black gloves, and they lie down as if they are preparing for their own burial. And every so often someone new will arrive, someone in clean clothes with a stiff posture, looking around with wide, curious eyes, looking like they don't belong. They usually don't return. You start to recognize the regulars. There's the talkative sailor. He always finds a mat near the center of the room and spends the first few minutes of each visit whispering loudly to anyone who will listen. He tells stories about the ports in Manila, about women he knew in Vancouver, about lost fingers, stolen wages, and bad fish. No one ever answers him, but that doesn't seem to stop him. His words only taper off when the pipe finally reaches his lips. After that, he just snores lightly, his arms crossed over his chest like a corpse laid out for judgment. You don't know his name, of course, but you start to time your own visits around his. He seems to be talking less now than he did a few weeks ago. You wonder if that's a good thing. The widow is always quiet. She wears the same black dress, the same pristine gloves. You once saw her remove them to clean the mouthpiece of her pipe, and her hands were pale and bird-like, with a faint, constant tremor in the fingers. She speaks only when absolutely necessary, and even then, only in short, clipped questions. Is it free tonight? Is it the strong stuff? Will it be quiet? The man in the blue jacket always answers her with a simple nod. You never see her eat. You never see her leave. You suspect she's there more often than you are, though it's hard to be sure, because that's another thing no one warns you about, the loss of time. It begins slowly, subtly. You think you've been lying down for 10 minutes, maybe 20. Then you open your eyes and find that the lamp has been trimmed for the night, the crowd in the room has completely changed, and your stomach is screaming at you, reminding you that you haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Eventually, you stop trying to keep track of it altogether. The concept of a day becomes a rumor, something that happens to other people. You start to use other markers to measure the passage of time, the condition of your socks, the growing soreness in your shoulders, the dull ache behind your teeth. If the floor is cold and damp when you wake, it's probably morning. If it's sticky with spilled resin and sweat, it's late at night. If the sailor is talking, it's early. If he's silent, it's time to go. You begin to mark your life not in hours, but in layers of discomfort. How bad the cough is when you wake up. How long it takes you to stand on your throbbing leg. Whether the first pipe of the night calms the shaking in your hands or just makes them twitch. The first few visits were measured, calculated. An hour here, an hour there. A stop between shifts at the docks, a reward for surviving another day on the hostile streets. But now you linger. The mat has started to remember the shape of your back. The air in the room smells less foreign, almost comforting. You know which pipe you'll get just by where you choose to sit. You know who touched it last. You know where to lie to avoid the slow drip from the ceiling, which mat doesn't squeak when you roll over, and which corner of the room goes completely unnoticed during the raids. Because, yes, there are raids. Not often, not yet, but enough to teach you how to listen for the sound of heavy footsteps on the floorboards above. The police don't come for you. Not exactly. They come for the place, for the story it tells, for the headlines it will generate. When they do come, it's fast and theatrical. A loud bang on the trap door, the thunder of boots on the wooden steps, orders barked in English and then in poorly translated, mocking Chinese. The older man who runs the den usually disappears before they even arrive, along with anything valuable enough to charge someone for. Those who can move fast do. They scatter into the night like startled rats. Those who can't, well, they either come back with fresh bruises and a new wariness in their eyes, or they don't come back at all. Historians still argue whether these early raids were genuine attempts at law enforcement or just a form of economic shakedown, a way for corrupt officers to collect unofficial taxes from the city's underbelly. To you, the distinction doesn't matter. It just hurts the same. In the quiet spaces between the raids and the rituals, you make small trades. You're long past using money. Now, you trade in pieces of your life. A button from your coat buys you another hour of peace. A promise of a day's work tomorrow, a promise you may or may not keep, buys you two. Once, you handed over a folded, yellowed letter you'd been carrying for months. A letter you wrote but never sent. The man in the blue jacket took it, placed a prepared pipe beside you without a word, and tucked the letter into his pocket. You don't know if he ever read it. You hope he didn't. You remember what it said, and that's bad enough. You rarely speak anymore. When you do, it's usually just to say thank you in a hoarse whisper, and even that feels too large for the room. Words don't carry well here. They feel out of place, like a sudden bright light in a grave. You listen instead. You listen to the sounds that repeat, the liturgy of the den, the scratch of the match, the soft bubbling of the melting opium, the sharp gasp of a breath drawn in too deep. Occasionally, someone hums a tuneless melody. Once, the quiet widow sang 2 lines of a song you didn't recognize, her voice thin and reedy, before she went completely silent for the next 3 hours. Another time, the sailor coughed so hard he vomited onto his mat, and no one even looked up. Not even you. You just closed your eyes and waited for the smell to fade. You begin to understand just how long you've been coming here, not by looking at a calendar, but by noticing what's gone missing from your life. Your belt, the lining of your coat, which you tore out to trade for a few hours of warmth, the silver button from your cuff that you used to fidget with. You don't miss them, not really. You just notice their absence in the same way you notice the new cracks forming in the ceiling or a different man sweeping the floor in the morning. The room changes, but it changes slowly, like a tide shifting while you sleep. You've begun to lie to yourself about how long you stay. Sometimes you force yourself to come up for air. Not for long, just long enough to walk a few blocks, to feel the cold rain on your face, to remind yourself that there is a world outside this basement. You invent errands for yourself, flimsy excuses to stay away from the pipe for a few hours. But when you do, the contrast stings. Outside, the streets are narrow, loud, and painfully bright. The city demands definition. Who are you? Where do you belong? What side of the line do you stand on? Inside the den, no one asks your name. No one cares. Chinatown isn't drawn on any official city map, but you learn where it begins by feel. The signage shifts from English to Chinese characters. The shop fronts grow more crowded, spilling their wares out onto the sidewalk. Whole roasted pigs hang in butcher shop windows, their skin lacquered to a deep glossy brown, their eyes glassy and vacant. Wooden carts creak along the uneven brick streets, steered by men in round-collared jackets and thin straw slippers. Women hurry past, carrying heavy baskets on one shoulder and umbrellas in the other, speaking in a language that moves too quickly for you to follow. The air smells sharper here. Star anise, fish sauce, soy, sesame oil, roasting pork. Nothing like the bland, boiled meals you remember from your past. It smells better, in a way, more alive. But the stares you get here are longer. Not cruel necessarily, just cautious, protective. You're an outsider, a low fan, and everyone knows it. You don't belong in the family-run boarding houses or the noisy gambling rooms or the herbalist shops with their walls of tiny labelled drawers and large glass jars full of dried, mysterious things. Seahorses, roots, fungi. You certainly don't belong in the narrow alleys between the laundry shops, where back doors lead to hidden staircases that lead to trapdoors that lead right back to the den you just left. You're tolerated in the way a stray dog might be. Not fed, not welcomed, but mostly ignored as long as you don't snarl or bark too loud. You learn to walk carefully, to keep your eyes forward and your hands visible. You keep your movements slow and small, trying to avoid looking like you're casing the shops for something to steal, or watching the women with improper intent. You pass men your own age who look right through you, their faces impassive. You pass boys half your size who sometimes follow you for a few steps before peeling off, already wise enough to know that a man like you is not worth the trouble. You don't blame them. If you saw yourself coming down the street, limping, gaunt, with haunted eyes, you'd cross to the other side too. The police certainly do. They hover just outside the unofficial district lines, walking in pairs, their shoulders squared and their batons held at the ready, as if they're afraid of catching something from the very air. Sometimes they storm through the neighborhood on a sweep, shouting in a language they barely bother to translate correctly. When that happens, you learn to disappear. You slip into an alley, through a door hidden behind a stack of crates in the back of a grocer's shop. You know you're not the primary target. Not exactly. They're here for the Chinese, for the rumors of gambling and vice, for the headlines. But you also know what happens when they get bored. An addict doesn't make a good witness, and you've already given up your boots. You have nothing left to offer them. The Chinese men who run the den, if run is even the right word, never show fear. Not visibly, not in the way you do, flinching at the sound of raised voices and the sudden thud of boots on the stairs. They move like smoke, quietly, deliberately, without any hurry. You wonder how long they've been here, in this city that both needs and despises them. You wonder how many of them came expecting to be miners, or merchants, or cooks, and found instead that there was more money to be made in silence, more safety to be found in the shadows. You hear whispers sometimes, in the den and on the street, about crackdowns, about new laws being passed, about deportations. You don't know what's true and what's just fear talking, but the tension hangs in the air like a held breath. Seattle's newspapers don't print nuanced stories anymore, just stark warnings. The opium menace in our midst, the yellow peril's poisonous drug, white women corrupted in Chinatown dens. You read the headlines on old scraps of newspaper used to wrap fish or stuff into the cracks in a window frame. You don't recognize yourself in their lurid descriptions of debauchery and moral collapse, but you recognize the fear, the kind of fear that turns lawmakers into crusaders and entire neighborhoods into evidence for the prosecution, the kind of fear that makes it easier to blame the pipe than the pain it numbs, the kind of fear that sells papers. You hear that smoking opium has been illegal for a while now, at least in the city. You don't know the specific dates or the details of the legislation. You just know that no one seems to be stopping it, not really. The trade goes on, tucked away behind laundries and grocery stores, kept quiet by a complex system of bribes and threats and centuries of practice. You also hear that the morphine pills the pharmacists sell in the clean, well-lit shops up on the hill are just as strong, if not stronger. But they're labeled and taxed and sold in respectable glass bottles, sometimes with the Queen's seal on them. You wouldn't know. You couldn't afford a bottle of those pills if you tried. Your poison doesn't come in glass. It comes wrapped in oil paper, passed from hand to hand, burned into the bowls of pipes, and breathed away before anyone official comes knocking. It's a quirky, hypocritical tidbit of the era. Many of the most vocal anti-opium crusaders were themselves quietly addicted to socially acceptable and often more potent opiate-laced patent medicines. You start to realize that even here, even in the shadows, even in the places no one else wants, you don't quite belong. You're not Chinese. You're not part of the family associations or the tongs that control the neighborhood. You're not even useful. You're just another white ghost wandering through a borrowed space, and the only reason they haven't told you to leave for good is because you're quiet, because you pay when you can, because you don't ask questions. You've become part of the furniture, faded, ignored, occasionally stepped over, but never, ever trusted. There's another den 2 blocks over, through a narrow brick archway behind a pawn shop that only deals in silver. You try it once. On a night when your usual place feels too crowded, the other den is a mistake. You know it the moment you step inside. It's reached through a narrow brick archway behind a pawn shop that only takes silver, a place you'd never be able to afford. You try it once, on a night when your usual spot feels too crowded, the air too thick with unspoken anxieties. The floors in this new place are harder, the air damper, and the pipes taste different, harsher. A younger man tends the lamps here, a man with no limp, no ritual in his movements, just fast, impatient gestures and eyes that never meet yours. He moves like a businessman, not a caretaker. The silence here isn't peaceful, it's tense. You don't go back. You prefer the first place, the one that feels less like a transaction and more like a surrender. You return to the familiar dampness of your chosen corner, to the man in the blue jacket, to the quiet rhythm you've come to depend on. The widow is still there, a fixed point in the shifting shadows. So is the sailor, though he talks even less now. His eyes look cloudier, and the tremor in his hand has become a constant, violent shake. You haven't seen the older man in the blue jacket for a few nights, and a quiet worry, small and unfamiliar, begins to prick at you. But then he returns, looking no different, and the room settles back into its usual state of calm decay. Another man sometimes takes his place, a man who is thinner, quieter, more formal. He He lights the pipe with a practiced, elegant flick of the wrist, wipes the mouthpiece with a cloth you think might once have been white, and says nothing when you lie back without speaking. You wonder where the first man goes on his nights off. You don't ask. It wouldn't matter. The pipe still comes. The relief still follows. You learn not to make noise when you enter, not to cough too loudly, not to stay too long after the last pipe has gone cold. You start to recognize faces, or rather silhouettes, postures, the way someone folds their arms or lies with one foot turned perpetually outward. The regulars, the ghosts. You are becoming one of them. The floorboards creak in different places now, as the building settles deeper into the mud. The lamps seem to dim earlier each night. The air feels heavier, but your lungs have stopped protesting. You no longer flinch at the sweet, cloying smell. You crave it, and the English language begins to fade from your life. It's not a sudden departure, just a gradual erosion, like everything else. One day you realize that no one has spoken to you in your own language for hours, then days. Conversations hum softly in Cantonese all around you, the words moving too fast and fluidly for you to follow. Instructions are now communicated through gesture, payment acknowledged with a simple glance. You stop trying to speak at all. It's easier that way, safer. Your world has shrunk to the size of this basement room, and in this room your language is useless. The newspapers, when you catch a glimpse of them, have found a new enemy. And this new enemy looks exactly like your friend, the man who once passed you a pipe without speaking, the one who tended to your mat with care and wiped the mouthpiece clean before placing it beside your hand. He's the monster now, according to the headlines. The tempter, the criminal mastermind, not the medicine itself, not the system that creates the pain, not the hollow ache in your own chest that made the pipe feel like breathing clean air for the first time. No, it's just him, his cue, his hands, his face. 1,000 printed words all saying the same thing, the thing nobody dares to shout aloud, but everyone whispers in the polling booths and church pews. The city begins to shake itself awake with a new righteous purpose. Its reformers march through the streets in polished boots, their faces glowing with a terrifying fury. Women in white gloves, members of the Purity League, hand out pamphlets downtown, their smiles tight and condescending. The pastors preach from their pulpits about the Eastern Plague and the corruption of white flesh. Politicians, smelling an election year, find their voices again. There are rallies now, public meetings filled with loud, angry voices and silent, ugly assumptions. The same men who once quietly bought the same smoke from the same bowl now stand on stages and sign papers declaring it unnatural, un-American, unholy. You see their names printed in the society pages, the same pages where a name like yours would never, ever appear. You learn to walk faster on the streets, to look smaller, to make yourself invisible. The raids come more often now, and they're messier. There's less warning, more shouting, fewer questions asked. The back doors to the dens are sealed, the trap doors nailed shut from above. One night, the younger of the two widows shows up at the den, her gloves torn, one side of her face swollen and bruised, the clear imprint of a hand across her cheek. She says nothing about it. No one asks. She just takes her pipe and turns her face to the wall. The first man you lose disappears quietly. You don't even notice at first. He was one of those who never made a sound, a permanent fixture on the same mat, in the same corner, with the same threadbare coat bundled under his head for a pillow. One day you realize his place has been empty for too long. Someone else lies there now, a younger man, curled in the opposite direction. You wait for the quiet man to return for a few days, then you stop waiting. You never knew his name. That makes it easier, in a way. The second man goes loudly. He was arrested during a police sweep downtown. He was white, middle-aged, and always dressed a little too well for someone who was using the pipe daily. They printed his name in the Seattle Daily Times, a small article on an inner page. It said he had been taken by the vice and was expected to testify against his Chinese suppliers. He didn't come back to the den after that. Maybe he's in jail. Maybe he skipped town. Maybe he got clean. Maybe not. You imagine the pipe in his hand one last time, his well-manicured fingers trembling the way yours do now. You wonder if he begged them, or if he went quiet. You hope he didn't cry. You hope you won't. The unspoken rules inside the den begin to change. They're not spoken, of course, but you can feel the shift in the air the moment you walk in. The pipes are passed with less ceremony now, more urgency. The flame in the lamps is kept dimmer. The supply of resin seems thinner. You notice fewer people are sleeping deeply. Everyone leaves sooner than they used to. They stay for an hour, maybe two, as if they are trying to stay beneath some invisible threshold they can't name but can all feel. You see the fear in their eyes, even when they're drifting in the haze. You see the question behind every slow exhale. Will I make it out this time? You hear that someone talked. Someone told the police where another den was. Not your den, but one nearby. That they offered up a name to save themselves from a beating or a jail cell. You hear that someone was beaten so badly they can't walk right anymore. That someone died in custody. That someone ran and was never seen again. The details of the stories change depending on who tells them, but the pattern holds. Each day, the city gets cleaner on the surface, louder in its pronouncements, and more afraid of itself. You hear words like cleanse, purify, and protect being spoken by people who have never needed protection from anything more serious than a bad investment. One night, the old man in the blue jacket returns, but just for a moment. He doesn't speak. He doesn't sit. He just stands near the entrance, his eyes scanning the room once, taking in the new faces and the new fear. Then he turns and leaves without a word. You watch him go. You think about following him, asking him where he's going, but you don't move. You tell yourself he was never really there, that you just imagined him. You never find out if he comes back again. You start hearing rumors of treatment centers. Not for the Chinese, of course, not really. But for the white ones, the ones the city has decided can still be saved. They're called sanitariums or hygienic institutions, and they promise cures in soft tones and clean linens. You hear that some men went in and came back different. Sober, maybe, or just emptied out. Their spirits scrubbed clean along with their bodies. You don't believe in cures anymore. Not the kind they print on posters or whisper into the ears of weeping widows. You don't have the money for a place like that anyway, and if you did, you'd rather spend it on silence. The streets grow meaner. You see more blood than you used to. Not a lot, not every day, but just enough to remind you where you are and what you are. A woman screaming behind a curtain in an alleyway. A man clutching his side, crawling under a wooden stairwell to be alone. A boy with a busted nose, wiping the blood clean on his sleeve without flinching, his eyes hard and old. You pass them all. You used to care. Maybe a part of you still does. But your limbs are so heavy now. Your breath comes slow and shallow. The ache in your side has become a part of you, as familiar as your own name, which you are starting to forget. One afternoon, though it might be morning or evening or something else entirely, You limp toward the den and find the door boarded over, not sealed with a police notice, not smashed in from a raid, just shut, carefully, quietly, as if it had just closed for the night and would reopen tomorrow. A small handwritten notice is tacked to the frame, but you don't bother to read it. You already know what it says. You stand there for a while, your socks damp inside your worn-out shoes, your breath visible in the cold air. You don't knock. You don't try the latch. You just turn around and walk until your legs give out. You sleep in a stairwell that night, curled up beside a crate that smells like old onions and rot. Your shoulder is pressed against the cold, damp stone. Your hip aches. You dream of smoke that won't light, of matches that break in your fingers, of mats that disappear the moment you blink. You wake up shivering, with a new kind of emptiness in your chest. Not pain exactly, but the hollow where the relief used to go. You spend the next few nights wherever you can, other stairwells, dark alleys, the empty space between two large crates behind a butcher shop that doesn't open on Sundays. You sleep in short, fitful bursts and wake up shivering, hungry, soaked in either rain or your own sweat, or both. Your stomach cramps from whatever scraps of food you managed to steal or beg for. You tell yourself, maybe the worst is over. Maybe you can stop now. You repeat it in your head like a prayer, over and over, until the aches in your body drown it out. The noise inside your ribs, the constant grinding need, becomes unbearable. You're not trying to chase the feeling of the high anymore. You're just trying to stop hurting. Word finds you slowly, passed through the city's network of ghosts. Someone who still has both of his boots and enough teeth left to speak clearly tells you about it. A new place. Smaller, tighter, hidden behind a tea shop on the very edge of Chinatown, where the signage has been painted over with black paint and the windows are covered with thick grey brushstrokes. You don't ask for details. You just go. You tell yourself you're only going to look, just to see who's still around, just to say goodbye to whatever it is you haven't yet admitted is already gone. The back entrance is a side door flanked by broken crates and a tin bucket full of stagnant, greasy water that you don't want to inspect too closely. No one answers when you knock. The latch gives way with a little pressure. Inside, the hallway is narrow, panelled in a sickly green paint that has curled away from the walls like dying leaves. You pass through a small kitchen that has been stripped of all life. There's no fire in the stove, no pots on the hooks, no scent of food, just a thick layer of dust and a few empty glass bottles turned on their sides. You follow the sound of nothing down 2 steps and through a beaded curtain into a basement room. The air thickens at once, dense with the familiar smell of smoke and the new smell of damp wool. No one speaks, not even to welcome you. The new den is worse in every way that counts. The ceiling is lower, so low you have to stoop to avoid hitting your head on the exposed pipes. The walls are stained with something dark that you hope is just water. The mats are older, thinner, and feel damp to the touch, even when the weather outside is dry. The only light comes from a single lantern with a cracked glass lens that flickers every time someone exhales too close to it. There's no incense burning here, no warm undertone of sesame or ginger to cut through the primary scent. There is only the smell of opium, sweat, and mildew. You sit down anyway, because where else would you go? The faces are half the same, half different. The quiet widow isn't here. The talkative sailor is, but he's not the same man. He no longer talks. He no longer even looks up. He just sits cross-legged against the far wall, staring at nothing, his mouth hanging slightly open as if he's forgotten what it was ever for. The new faces don't make eye contact. One woman lies curled in a corner with a scarf wrapped tightly over her eyes, her hand twitching every few minutes. as if she's swatting away a bad dream. A man who looks to be in his 30s lies flat on his stomach, completely unmoving, the soles of his shoes worn all the way through to the lining. The ritual is the same, but the hands that perform it are different. The new keeper, if he can even be called that, is just a boy, no older than 16, with a long, thin face and a jagged scar running from his cheekbone to his ear. He doesn't look at anyone. He doesn't bother to clean the pipes between users. He moves quickly, impatiently, scooping the sticky paste from a shallow tin jar, barely heating it over the lamp before handing it over. There's no ceremony now, no quiet reverence. There is only transaction, only habit, only raw, desperate need. You try to pretend it's the same. You lie back on the damp mat. You take the pipe when it's offered. You inhale. The smoke is thicker, harsher than you remember, but it settles your stomach long enough for you to forget how empty it is. Your limbs grow warm. The frantic pounding in your head quiets to a dull thrum. But it doesn't last. The relief thins out much faster now. It breaks apart like wet paper in your hands. You can't hold on to it the way you used to, and when it fades, the pain returns, but it comes back worse, as if it's been sharpening itself in the dark while you were drifting. Your body starts failing you in ways you can no longer ignore. First, it's your gums. They bleed when you chew the stale bread you sometimes find, then they bleed when you speak, then they just bleed for no reason at all. Your teeth ache in the cold air and feel loose in their sockets when you press your tongue against them. Your hair, which was once thick, has become dull and thin. It falls out in small patches that you don't notice until you run a hand through it and come away holding something that should still be a part of you. Your fingernails crack and peel. Your skin flakes. Your stomach clenches and burns even when there's nothing in it. You cough more often now, and it's not just from the smoke. Something has taken root deep in your lungs, something wet and rattling. You try to swallow it down, to hide the sound when others are sleeping, but it echoes off the low ceiling and damp basement walls like an accusation. One night, your throat spasms so hard that you curl forward on the mat and feel a warm rush of blood rise up behind your teeth. You taste copper. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve. No one turns their head. The boy with the scar says nothing. He just lights another pipe and passes it to someone else without looking in your direction. You lie back again, turning your face to the cold stone wall, the mat damp beneath you. Your spine feels every ridge and imperfection in the floor. You feel hollow. You are hollow, but not clean, just emptied out to make room for something you can't name. You don't remember when you last ate a real meal or washed your face or had a dream that wasn't about falling. There is no widow here to measure time against, no talkative sailor to mark the passing of the hours. There is just the flickering lantern, the smell of rot, and the constant wet sound of someone coughing behind the curtain near the stairs. You think someone might have died in here once, maybe recently. You don't ask. You wouldn't know who to ask. You stopped tracking names a long time ago. Now you track symptoms. Stiff fingers, shaking legs, the speed of your own breath, the color of the phlegm that comes up when you cough, the way your heart sometimes skips a beat, like it's thinking of leaving before you're ready. You sleep less deeply in this place. The stillness is different here. It's less like peace and more like waiting. You don't feel safe when you drift off. You feel suspended, like something is holding you underwater, just long enough to remind you that it can. You wake up in a cold sweat that smells wrong. Your mouth is always dry, your eyes crusted shut. You don't speak in the mornings anymore. There's no one to speak to, and your voice doesn't come easily anyway. It feels like an old, rusty tool you've forgotten how to use. One night, A man tries to sell you back your own coat. It's unmistakably yours. You recognize the rip at the hem, the same missing button near the collar, only now it's been turned inside out and scrubbed with something that smells like lye, a futile attempt to clean it. You don't argue. You just shake your head and let him keep it. You don't remember when you lost it anyway. Another night, you try to stand up and your legs simply fold beneath you. You hit the hard floor with a thud. No one moves to help you. You lie there for a minute until the boy with the scar nudges you with his foot and tells you to pick a different mat, one in the corner. His voice is flat, tired, barely more than a whisper. You crawl to the corner. You thank him. He doesn't answer. One night, you don't go back to the den. Not because you've made a conscious decision, not because you're finally ready to stop, but because something inside you feels scraped bare, like there's nothing left inside that even the smoke could cling to. You just sit in the alley behind the tea shop, your back pressed against the cold, wet bricks, your knees pulled up to your chest. You watch the faint glow from the second-floor window of a nearby boarding house fade as the night deepens. The sky above is the color of dirty dishwater. You tell yourself you'll get up and move in a few minutes. That was hours ago. A churchman finds you in the alley. His voice is kind. His eyes are not. He's an older man, broad-shouldered, wearing a long wool coat that fits him too neatly for the kind of penetrating cold you've come to know. His collar is high and white. His hands are clean. He kneels down beside you with the sort of practiced humility that people like him wear when they've never had to beg for anything in their lives. He says he's from the mission, that they're here to help, that they've set up a place just a few blocks away. Warm beds, hot soup, clean water, no questions asked. He calls you son. He says there's still hope. You don't answer him. He keeps talking anyway, his breath smelling of mints and old sermons. He tells you the den is killing you, that the pipe was never meant for someone like you, that your soul still belongs to God, no matter how far you've strayed. You look at his clean, soft hands, and you think of the boy with the scar behind the curtain, the way he passed the pipe with fingers stained black from resin and heat. You nod once, just to make him stop talking. That's all it takes. He guides you by the elbow, his grip surprisingly strong. You're too tired to resist. The mission is clean, at least on the outside. Whitewashed walls, a wide wooden door, curtains pressed smooth behind the clean windows. Inside, the light is brighter than any light you've seen in weeks. It hurts your eyes. The woman at the front desk hands you a pamphlet before she even greets you. It's titled Redemption Through Restraint. You don't read it. She points you toward a long wooden bench and tells you to wait. You sit. You nod. Your legs ache with a deep throbbing pain. They take your name, or what's left of it. They ask you where you were born, whether you can read, whether you are willing to accept their guidance. You lie twice. You say whatever you think they want to hear. It doesn't matter. They've already made up their minds about who and what you are. You're shuffled down a long, sterile hallway, handed a thin bar of soap and a threadbare towel, and told to wash in a narrow room where the water runs lukewarm and smells of iron. Your clothes are taken from you and replaced with a set of scratchy grey linens that are one size too big. Someone mutters a prayer on the other side of the door as you dress. You're led to a long room lined with narrow cots, each with a single folded blanket, and a printed copy of the New Testament tucked beneath the pillow. The men already lying on the cots don't look at you. Some are asleep. Some are pretending to be. One man just stares straight ahead, unmoving, his eyes fixed on something behind the ceiling. You lie down slowly, the thin mattress crackling beneath you like old paper. The blanket smells of lye and old hands. You don't close your eyes. That night, you don't dream. You just lie there and listen to the sounds of the mission. The coughing, the rustle of Bible pages turning, the occasional shuffle of footsteps on the cold tile floor. Someone mutters scripture in their sleep. Someone else sobs without making a sound. You stare at the ceiling and trace the cracks with your eyes until the first grey light of morning begins to bleed through the dirty window panes. A bell rings somewhere down the hall, and the smell of weak broth wafts into the room. You stay where you are. Before breakfast, there's a prayer circle. You're expected to stand, to bow your head, to accept the hand of the man next to you. The churchman is there, the same one who found you in the alley. He smiles at you like he's already decided that you've been saved. He says something about the power of renewal. You nod again. You've gotten good at that. Breakfast is a bowl of thin broth and 2 slices of stale bread. You eat it slowly, chewing each bite until it dissolves into something tasteless and vaguely sweet. Across the table from you, a man in his 50s, thin and balding, his face deeply lined, stares into his own bowl as if he's forgotten what to do with it. His lips move, but no sound comes out. You don't try to speak to him. You finish your bread and push the empty bowl away. After the meal, they hand out more pamphlets. Hope for the lost. The path of the redeemed. Victory over vice. Each one is neatly printed, the covers glossy, the language careful and condescending. A woman in a green dress with lace gloves reads aloud from one of them, her voice clipped and unnaturally cheery. You don't hear most of what she says. Your own thoughts are louder. Your stomach cramps again. Your hands are trembling. You can feel the cold deep under your skin, in the marrow of your bones, the place where the pipe used to live. They tell you there's work available for those who are willing. Dishwashing, wood chopping, folding envelopes for a mailing campaign. You say you're not feeling well. A man with a large wooden cross hanging around his neck tells you that's just the sickness leaving your body. He says that it's a good sign, that pain is cleansing, that this is proof that you're still capable of being saved. You want to ask him if he's ever tasted withdrawal, if he's ever curled up on a cold floor and prayed to simply stop existing. You don't ask. He wouldn't understand. You sit on your cot for another hour, your hands in your lap, staring at the unfamiliar shoes on your feet. They don't fit quite right. One of your toes is curled over the edge of the sole. The backs are stiff and pinch your heels with every small movement. You think about the mat in the den. You think about the dampness, the flickering light, the way the pipe would slide into your hand without any questions. You think about the smoke, how it curled into your chest and soothed the constant grinding ache behind your ribs. You think about the silence, about not being watched, about not being forgiven. You stand up. No one tries to stop you. The churchman sees you on your way out. He's talking to a woman with tear-stained cheeks, but he breaks off his sentence to grab your hand. He asks if you'll be back for the evening service. He says there's still time. He says he believes in you. You nod again, but this time it feels like a lie even before your chin moves. You don't answer him. You just pull your hand away and step outside. The air hits your face like a slap. Cold, wet, honest. You walk fast, turning corners without thought, moving on pure muscle memory and a deep, gnawing dread. You head back toward the alley, toward the hidden door behind the tea shop, toward the smoke and the silence and the dim, forgiving light that doesn't ask for anything from you. You don't know what you'll have to trade this time. Maybe you have nothing left. Maybe you'll have to trade something you haven't yet admitted you're willing to give. You don't care. The smoke is waiting. And the room, when you finally crawl back into it, hasn't changed at all. The boy with the scar doesn't even ask where you've been. You lie back on the damp mat and let it all dissolve again, the memory of the clean sheets and the mint-scented prayers fading like a bad dream. You don't know how many days pass. 3, maybe 4, maybe more. You wake only to cough, or to shift your aching bones on the thin mat, or simply to breathe. You eat whatever is passed your way, if anything is passed at all. You pay with what you can find. One night, you trade a single stiff leather glove you'd forgotten was stuffed in your waistband. Another time, you barter a mended sock you were still wearing, pulling it from your foot and handing it over without a word. You stop thinking in full days or even nights, only in the cycle of waking and nodding, in the binary of cold and warmth, in the moments when the pipe comes and the long, aching stretches when it doesn't. The silence in the room deepens, becoming a physical presence. The pipe is halfway to your mouth when the door splinters. It happens fast, too fast for anyone to react in the right way. The door doesn't creak or slam open, it shatters, a single violent crack of wood and boot and shouted English flooding the air all at once. Someone screams, a high, thin sound that is cut off abruptly. Someone tries to run. The beaded curtain is torn down in one rough, sweeping motion, and suddenly the basement is filled with harsh, blinding light from bullseye lanterns and the thunder of heavy boots and the cacophony of noise. You try to sit up, the pipe still warm in your hand, your body caught in a moment of indecision, unsure whether to move or to freeze. Before you can decide, something strikes your shoulder, hard, and you drop the delicate stem to the floor, where it rolls away beneath a mat. The shouting doesn't stop. You hear orders being barked, names you don't recognize. Someone is yelling, "Down, get down," and someone else is coughing up blood. Through the chaos, you see the boy with the scar pinned against the far wall by a man twice his size, a thick wooden club pressed hard against his throat. The boy doesn't fight. He doesn't plead. He just looks away, his face a blank mask of resignation. 2 officers grab the man who used to sweep the floor, an old man with a pronounced limp, and drag him across the room, his legs flailing uselessly against the mats and limbs of the others. He spits something at them in Cantonese, a curse you don't understand, and one of them answers with a sharp knee to his ribs. You try to stand and fail. Your legs don't work the way they used to. You're hauled up by the collar of your shirt, or what's left of it, and shoved hard against the damp brick wall. The impact rattles your teeth. A fist finds your stomach, knocking the air from your lungs in a painful whoosh. Another cracks against the side of your face. You don't remember falling, but your cheek hits the hard floor with a sickening thud. When you try to roll over, your mouth floods with the familiar metallic taste of iron, and you feel something loose shift in your jaw. You look up through one eye, and all you can see is a forest of black leather boots. They're not here to save you. That much is obvious. They don't ask who's in charge or who brought the resin into the city. They don't read names from a list or check identification. They don't bother to separate the users from the sellers, the runaways from the regulars, the sick from the lost. They don't bother with nuance. They came for bodies, for numbers, for something to put in a report and show the mayor's office when the week ends. You are not a person to them. You are proof that they are doing their job. You are a statistic in the making. You're dragged upstairs with a group of others, half limping, half carried, and thrown into the back of a wagon that smells of sweat and mildew and old vomit. Someone is sobbing quietly in the corner. Someone else is bleeding openly from a deep gash above his eyebrow. A man in his 40s is unconscious, his head lolling against the side of the cart with every jolt. You sit wedged between two strangers, your shoulder dislocated, or something very close to it, your breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. No one speaks. The wagon rattles down the cobblestone streets like a hearse too cheap to care about the bumps in the road. At the city jail, you're searched, rough hands moving through your pockets, up your sleeves, inside the waistband of your trousers. They take nothing of value, because you have nothing of value left. You're lined up against a cold, grimy wall and told to state your name. You give it, your voice a hoarse croak. The officer at the desk doesn't write it down. You're processed, or at least moved. You're not given a proper cell. Not really. Just a cot in a large, crowded room with 6 other men. There are no blankets, no questions. You're fed something they call soup, though it tastes like wet chalk and boiled onion peels. You choke it down and try to sleep with your back to the wall, your arms folded tight across your chest to keep your ribs still. You're not arraigned. You're not given a lawyer. You're not asked if you understand the charges against you. There may not even be any charges. On the 4th day, or what you guess is the 4th day, you're handed what few worthless items you still possessed and a thin slip of paper with a smudged ink stamp on it. It says fine, vagrancy. There's no amount listed, no receipt, just that. You walk out of the jail and into the morning haze, your jaw swollen to twice its normal size, your ribs tight with every breath, and your left eye a mottled canvas of red and purple from burst vessels. No one meets you. No one asks what happened. You lean against the cold stone steps of the jailhouse and breathe slowly through your nose, because your mouth still won't close properly. You don't know what happened to the others. You never see the boy with the scar again. You never see the old man with the limp. You walk past the tea shop 2 days later and find the windows dark, a fresh coat of black paint covering the signage. The door is sealed shut with a new shiny lock. A sign in the window says, "Closed for renovation." You know what that means. You don't check again. Your limp gets worse. One leg seems to drag behind you when you're tired, which is always. Your teeth ache constantly in the cold, damp air. One is missing now, the back molar on the left side, dislodged either by a knee or by the cold metal bar they pushed your face against. You don't remember exactly when it happened. Your shoulder clicks audibly every time you lift your arm. You stop lifting it. No one calls what happened justice. You don't hear people talking about the raid on the street, at least not in any detail. Some of the newspapers run short, triumphant columns. Chinatown vice raid nets results. Opium den shut down by heroic officers. The photographs, if there are any, don't include your face. You're not what they want people to see. You're the part of the story they sweep aside with a phrase like habitual users, like weathered bricks, like mildew. No one wants to read about mold unless it's been scrubbed away. Your skin hangs looser on your frame now. Your tongue forgets names. You feel it first in your sleeves, the way the fabric gathers around your wrists, no longer filled out by your forearm or any gesture. Your pants slip down on your hips when you walk, though you walk less and less these days. Your face changes too. It grows sharper in the wrong places, softer in the others. Your cheeks hollow out. Your jaw seems to vanish on some days, and on others it juts out in a shop window's reflection like it belongs to someone else. Not that you look at your reflection often. You already know what's missing. You try to think of names sometimes, the names of people you once worked with, slept beside, sat near on long rumbling train rides across the plains. Some of the names come back to you, but slowly, if at all. They feel worn smooth, like river stones, with no sharp edges for your memory to catch on. Most of them are just gone. The last names go first, then the first names. Eventually, you realize you've forgotten what your own name sounded like when spoken in someone else's voice. You sleep more, but not in the way that rests you. You drop off like a candle being tipped sideways, suddenly and without any warning, and you wake up hours later with no sense of what happened in between. Sometimes your limbs are tangled in unfamiliar, painful positions. Once, you wake up with your face pressed against a puddle of something that isn't quite water. Your legs are stiff, your back is wet, and your chest feels tight, like it's forgotten how to lift and fall. You scratch yourself in your sleep. You know this because of the angry red welts on your arms and thighs, the tiny half-moons your own fingernails have carved into your skin. Some of them become sores. Some of them swell and weep. One day you find tiny white worms curled in a damp wound behind your knee. You pull them out, one by one, with fingers that don't tremble anymore. You feel nothing. You rinse the spot with the last of the rainwater from a tin cup you found, and you go back to lying down. Infections come next. They are quiet, slow, inevitable. One of your teeth blackens, then two. You stop trying to chew altogether. Your breath smells sour, even to you. The skin around your ankle cracks open and refuses to close. You wrap it with a dirty strip of cloth you tore from your shirt hem and hope it doesn't spread too fast. It does. Your fingers swell, then deflate, leaving the skin wrinkled. The nails curl inward. You stop noticing. You begin to lose entire days, not just hours or conversations, but spans of time so large they feel like cliffs that have crumbled away from the middle of a road. You wake up in places you don't remember walking to, on the stone steps of a church, under the wooden porch of an abandoned house, inside a large packing crate that once held cabbages. You find things in your pockets you don't remember trading for. Once, a handful of dried beans. Another time, a child's glass marble. You carry the marble with you for a week before you lose it in a gutter. You miss it more than you should. Hallucinations come quietly, like old friends. You see people you once knew standing just at the edge of your vision, smiling, waving, walking towards you with slow, deliberate steps. They vanish the moment you turn to face them. You hear your name being whispered from the mouths of shopkeepers you've never spoken to. You hear your mother's voice in the sound of a rusty door hinge groaning in the wind. You hear bells that no one else hears, ringing at odd hours, always too far away to chase. You don't talk about this. There's no one to talk to. You've outlasted most of the others. The sailor is gone. The widow hasn't been seen in months. The boy with the scar vanished with the last raid. A few of the others, the ones who knew how to barter, how to lie well enough to stay out of jail, have faded into different streets, different corners, maybe different vices. You don't know. You stopped asking a long time ago. The city doesn't look any different, but it feels sharper. The edges catch you now. The stairs seem to trip you more often. The walls of the alleyways seem to lean inward, threatening to crush you. The corners of the buildings slice the wind harder against your ribs. You don't blame the city. You're no longer surprised by how small you've become. You begin to recognize the other ghosts. Not spirits, not phantoms, but the living ones. The men and women who walk past you without turning their heads, who shuffle with the same heavy weight in their knees, whose skin has the same dry, parchment-like hue as yours. You meet their eyes sometimes. There's no pity in those exchanges, just recognition, a mutual, unspoken agreement that this is what's left. Food is rare. Even when you find it, it barely registers. Half a biscuit from a trash can, a piece of old bread that cracks like wood when you bite it, a potato that has gone soft and sweet with rot. You eat what you can, and you vomit when you must. Hunger isn't a pain anymore. It's just a fact. It's like the rain, or the wind, or the sound of boots walking past the alley where you lie. The pipe is rarer now too, but it still finds you sometimes. Passed to you by a familiar hand in a dark doorway, purchased with a promise you have no intention of keeping. You take it not for the escape anymore, but for the steadying. It levels the violent shake in your hands. It settles your heartbeat into something more rhythmic, less frantic. It doesn't soothe you anymore. It just pauses the deterioration for an hour or two. That's enough. There is a kind of peace in this stage of your decline. Not comfort, not acceptance, just a horrifying calm that comes from knowing that nothing worse can happen to you that hasn't already happened. You are past hope, past shame, past even memory in any useful form. What remains is routine. You sleep when your body demands it. You move when you must. You beg when you can. The rest is just waiting. Not for anything in particular, just waiting. You don't flinch at the cold anymore. You don't notice your own smell. You don't wonder if people can see your ribs through your shirt. You no longer care who watches you lie down in the daylight. You no longer apologize when you're stepped over. You've become part of the street, something present but not counted, like a loose cobblestone or a discarded bottle. One evening, you try to count the days since you last had a clean shirt, and you lose track halfway through. Not because the number is too high, but because you can't remember what day it is now, or what day it was yesterday, or the one before that. It could be winter. It could be spring. It doesn't matter. You find a coal bin behind a butcher's shop. It's half full and dry enough to sleep in, low enough to the ground to go unnoticed. You crawl in carefully, lowering yourself between the dusty wooden slats, ignoring the way the black grit clings to your clothes and your skin. You curl into yourself, your knees pulled up to your chest, your cheek pressed against a half-crushed sack of old ash. You listen for footsteps, but none come. You breathe in the smell of smoke and soot and old iron. You finally find another den. It's hidden behind a false wall in a laundry. You have to crawl in on all fours. Someone told you about it 2 nights ago, or maybe longer. A man with cracked glasses and dried blood on his cuffs said there was still one place left. Quiet, he'd said, tucked behind a shop that used to bleach linens for the railroad hotels. It's off an alley so narrow you have to turn sideways to pass between the wooden fence and the brick wall. You have to duck under a hanging sheet, still stained yellow from someone else's wash. You knock the wrong way at first, a pattern you can't quite remember. A hand pulls you inside anyway. The door closes behind you. It doesn't latch, just sticks in the frame like it's been warped by years of time and heat and neglect. The air inside is warmer than you expected, heavy with the sour steam of boiled rags and wood smoke. There's no sign, no name, just the low hum of human breath and the faint whistle of a kettle on a stove that no one has bothered to silence. You crawl through a gap in the back wall where the boards have been cut away in a jagged mouth just wide enough for a body to pass through. You drag yourself through, scraping your knee against a nail that someone should have hammered down. On the other side, it's darker than it should be. The ceiling is low, the walls are bare. Mats line the floor in irregular, crowded rows. Each one is thin and buckled and permanently shaped by the weight of people who haven't left in a long time. This one is different, not in its structure, but in its feel. The smoke here is stronger. It coats your throat as soon as you inhale. It burns your nostrils. It makes your eyes sting. It doesn't smell like the old places. It's sharper, more chemical, less earthy. The resin has been cut with something cheaper. Quinine, maybe, or morphine. Something bitter, faster, less patient. The den is run by someone younger than you remember ever being. A girl, maybe 15 years old, with a shaved head and arms as thin as broomsticks. She doesn't clean the pipes. She just reloads them with a practiced, detached muscle memory and drops them in your lap without making eye contact. The pipes themselves are old and blackened, the bowls cracked, the lamps flicker low, their fuel stretched too thin. There is no incense, no hot water, no food, just smoke and shadow and the sound of lungs giving up. You watch someone die on your first night there. It's not dramatic. It's just a long, slow exhale that doesn't reverse itself. A final twitch of the fingers, a slow tilt of the head toward the wall. No one moves. No one screams. The girl walks over, checks for breath with the back of her hand, then drags the body out by the ankles. You don't know where it goes. You don't ask. She returns a minute later with a cold, damp cloth and wipes the mat down before folding it in half. Someone new is lying there within the hour. You start seeing death more often. Not always the full stop, but sometimes just the beginning of it. The rattle in a throat that never clears. The dry, cracked lips that stop moving. The eyes that don't shut when the body does. You stop reacting, not from cruelty, but from custom. It's part of the room now, like the dripping pipe near the wall or the patch of floor that stays damp even when the others dry. You lie there and let the new, harsher smoke fill your mouth, your lungs, your skull. You stop counting how long the relief lasts. The high is different now. It's not soft anymore, not calming. It hits you like a wave of nausea, swells into your limbs, and then crashes hard behind your eyes. You get dizzy every time. You forget who you are. Then you remember. Then you forget again. Your vision blurs even when your eyes are closed. The warmth in your body is fake. You know that now. It's a chemical warmth, a borrowed heat, like standing in the sunlight that comes through a pane of glass just before it shatters. You start to hear things that aren't there, not voices, but sounds. Crickets in the middle of winter, bells from towers that don't exist, a piano playing a song you swear you once knew. You hum along sometimes, your lips moving around nothing. No one notices, or if they do, they don't care. The girl runs things with a silent, grim efficiency. She doesn't smile. She doesn't scold. When you can't pay, she doesn't throw you out. She just gives you less. She knows you'll come back either way. You stop offering excuses. There's nothing left to trade now. Nothing tangible, nothing meaningful. Just your presence, your weight on the mat, your breath in the air. That's enough, for now. The others don't talk. You don't even see their faces clearly anymore. Just outlines, curls of dark hair, shoulders hunched in what could be prayer or surrender. You stop seeing men and women. You just see shapes, shadows, ghosts wrapped in thin cloth. There's one who coughs in a steady rhythm every night. Another who rocks gently back and forth with each breath. You grow used to them in the way that people grow used to furniture. They are part of the room, part of the noise. You dream of places you've never been. A field of tall green grass. A lake with a single empty boat drifting aimlessly on its surface. A city full of bright lights that don't flicker. In the dreams, you always have shoes on your feet, a name on your lips, a clean face. You wake up sweating and disappointed every single time. Your ribs press sharp against your skin. Your hip bones ache when you lie down for too long, but your legs give out when you try to stand. You feel your body failing in pieces now. First one knee, then a wrist, then the skin around your mouth. It splits when you yawn. It bleeds when you smile, which is rare enough not to matter. You stop wiping the blood away. You lose track of how many times you go back, whether you ever leave at all, whether days are passing, or if you're just dreaming time into motion. The lamplight blurs into a single constant smear. The sound of coughing replaces your thoughts. The pipe appears in front of you, and your hands reach for it before your brain even registers the gesture. You inhale. You drift. You wake. You reach again. No one tells you to stop. Eventually, you stop thinking of escape, not because you've accepted this life, but because the concept of escape requires the memory of another kind of life, and you've misplaced it. There is no comparison anymore. There is just this, just here, just the mat beneath your bones, the smoke in your throat, the soft, distant clatter of a spoon in a bowl somewhere far away. You wonder if someone upstairs is still washing laundry. You doubt it. You don't remember the last time you left the room, the last time you stood fully upright, the last time you looked at another human face and felt a flicker of recognition. You lie on your side most of the time now, your eyes half closed, your fingers twitching around a pipe that may or may not be lit. You drift in and out of something too thin to be called sleep. You forget the difference between your dreams and your waking moments. Eventually, you don't wake up. It isn't violent. It isn't loud. There's no gasping for air, no thrashing, no dramatic collapse. It is just a breath that slows and then stops. A stillness that settles over you like a final, heavy blanket. The girl sees you in the morning, lying in the same way you always lie, on your side with one hand curled up toward your face. She doesn't check for a pulse. She doesn't need to. She's seen it enough times to recognize the angle of the jaw, the slackness in the shoulder, the way the eyes stay closed for too long without twitching. She kneels down, pulls the mat free from under you, and wraps you in the same thin grey blanket she uses for all the others. No one asks your name. No one writes it on a tag or slips a piece of paper between your fingers. The girl and another shadow carry you through the gap in the wall and into the laundry room, which no longer runs water or washes clothes, but still holds the faint sour stink of old soap and decay. You're placed beside a stack of broken furniture, waiting for the city cart to come and haul it all away. You are not the first body this building has held. You will not be the last. A few hours pass. A city cart arrives, pulled by a single, tired-looking horse. Two men in blue uniforms that don't quite fit climb down. They don't speak to each other. They lift you with more care than you might have expected, but not much. Your head bumps against the wooden side of the cart as they load you in. One of the men grunts. The other one keeps chewing whatever is in his cheek. You're covered with a canvas sheet, but not fully. One of your feet sticks out. It's bare, black with soot from the floor, and curled slightly inward. You're taken to the city crematorium. Not the one they use for dignitaries or for those who paid in advance, but the cheaper facility down by the mill canal, where the smoke from the chimney always smells like char, and where the windows are nailed shut so no one can look in. Your body waits there on a gurney until someone finishes the paperwork. It doesn't take long. There are boxes on the forms that are pre-printed for cases like yours. No family. No assets, no known cause of death worth investigating. You're listed under a category they call unclaimed male. Approx. 35 to 50 years. They average it out. No one checks. The clerk misspells your name, not because she's careless, but because the name was given to her by someone else, halfway remembered, and scribbled on a receipt for a night's stay in the jail 2 winters ago. She doesn't pause. She doesn't ask. She writes it once, copies it again, and files the form away with a dozen others from the same week. One is a sailor. One is a man they found behind a fish stall. One is just marked unknown Asian. You're cremated within the day. There is no funeral, no prayer, no notice in the paper, no procession. The furnace door closes. The flame roars. The room smells of burnt cloth and then of ash. Your bones powder faster than most. They were brittle from months of malnutrition and damp. There's little left of you, just enough to fill a small tin canister stamped with the city seal and locked with a hinge that no longer seals tight. The canister sits on a shelf in a back room for a while, maybe a few weeks, maybe less. When the shelf fills up, a worker takes a few of them and buries them together in a shallow, unmarked trench behind the facility wall. They don't mark the spot. It's just a row of sunken grass that grows a little greener than it should. You lie beside men you never met and women no one ever looked for. The city counts you among its charitable losses. Somewhere in a dusty budget report, your entire existence is reduced to a cost of $1.83 in labor and fuel. Back at the den, the girl doesn't speak about you. She folds the mat, sets it aside, and scrubs the spot on the floor with water from a rusted tin pail. She replaces the lamp, which had grown dim anyway. A new man takes your spot before the day ends. He doesn't notice the faint dark stain in the floorboards. No one does. The pipe passes to him, just as it once passed to you. Warm, silent, waiting. A week later, the new den is raided. They arrest everyone who is still conscious. The girl vanishes. No one ever hears what happened to her. Maybe she ran. Maybe they took her somewhere deeper into the system. The wall is sealed up with fresh boards. The laundry is emptied out. The tea shop changes hands again. By the end of the month, a new tenant moves in. He runs an import business. Dried leaves, canned lychees, boxes of spice labeled in elegant cursive. The window gets cleaned for the first time in a year. The gap in the back wall is plastered over. The smell of opium slowly fades, replaced by the scent of cinnamon and cardamom. Customers come in during the daylight. The floor is swept twice a week. The new owner never asks what the back room was used for before he arrived. He doesn't care. The past here is quiet. It doesn't raise its voice. No one remembers your face. You never even made the papers. The streets where you once staggered are paved now, smoother and brighter than you ever knew them. The gas lights gave way to electric bulbs, clean and humming high overhead, shining down on rows of tidy shop fronts and clipped newspaper stands. The alley you died behind is still there, but it's narrower now, hemmed in by concrete and commerce. The laundry is gone. The butcher's shop is a wine bar. Someone parks a bicycle where your body once lay shivering. It locks neatly to a metal post painted in the city's regulation blue. No one remembers the den, not the last one or the first. No one remembers the boy with the scar, or the widow in her black gloves, or the sailor with the tremor in his hand. The buildings they huddled in have been leased, flipped, painted, and rezoned. They are offices now, or storage units, or condominiums. One is a wellness studio, offering eucalyptus steam and light jazz that echoes from within. The floorboards you bled on were ripped out long ago, the beams treated and sealed. The air smells different now. Lavender, citrus, stone polished with lemon oil. The past doesn't rot here anymore. It's sanitized. Downtown gleams with steel and glass. Towers rise higher every year, their reflections stitching themselves into the surface of the harbor, like something trying to forget its own foundation. The new streets are wider, the sidewalks less cracked. The city speaks in terms of growth now. Rising property values, new transit corridors, export economies. Tourists buy postcards with hand-colored watercolors of the skyline, filtered sunsets and waterfront views that never show the gutters. Chinatown shrinks slowly, legally. No fire this time, just permits, just zoning laws, just the price per square foot climbing higher than its tenants can reach. The signs in the windows still carry Chinese characters, but there are fewer of them each year. English creeps in through paperwork and developer branding. A family-run shop selling dried mushrooms is replaced by a boutique tea lounge with soft lighting and delicate ceramic cups imported from elsewhere. You can still get pork buns and ginger candy, but they cost more now, and someone behind the counter will always offer to speak to you in English first. Where you once lay on a damp mat behind a boarded-up door, someone now holds yoga poses on a floor made of imported bamboo. The heat is controlled by a thermostat. The lights dim on timers. No one coughs behind a curtain. There are no curtains, only large, clean windows that look out over the city and its endless promise of progress. No one remembers what was underneath. Or maybe they do. Maybe they just choose not to say. The clinics are modern now. The medicine comes in glass bottles with stamped labels and printed dosage instructions. You can buy opiates with a prescription, measured by the milligram, and covered by insurance if you fill out the right forms. The same smoke you once inhaled with blood in your mouth now comes in the form of time-release tablets in amber-colored vials. You don't need to crawl through a hole in a wall anymore. You just need a doctor who writes prescriptions quickly and doesn't ask too many questions. The new version doesn't smell as sweet, but it works in much the same way. There are advertisements now for relief, for sleep, for calm. The same promises the pipe once whispered into your ear now appear on billboards and on the shelves of pharmacies. Take the edge off. Reclaim your peace. Let go. You see mothers in glossy magazine spreads, smiling with soft, serene eyes, holding the bottles in one hand and a sense of peace of mind in the other. A pill, not a pipe. A box, not a basement. But the principle is the same. The companies that make them make their money up front now, not in the shadows or in back alleys, but in dividends and marketing campaigns. They sponsor marathons and health fairs. They donate to libraries and children's hospitals. Their names are etched into the sides of buildings downtown, right beside the banners for banking and tech. If you overdose today, there's a hotline you can call. There's a commercial about it on television. There's a plan. There's a press release. There's a statement from a politician expressing their deep concern. There is still suffering, of course, but it's quieter in some places and louder in others, depending on which part of the city you're in. The neighborhoods change, the names change, the drugs change, but the ache remains. The hole remains. The hands still shake. The stomach still burns. The mind still unravels in the same familiar patterns. Now they call it a crisis. They give it acronyms. They hold panels and write grants. They study it, but they don't end it. They study you too. Men like you, lives like yours. They call it social decay, historical case studies, marginalized populations. You appear in the footnotes of history now. You're a data point in a paper someone presents at a university conference. Unhoused adult male, opium dependency, deceased. The students in the audience nod. The professor moves on to the next slide. No one asks for your name. They wouldn't be able to pronounce it correctly anyway. No plaque marks the place where you died. No obituary preserves your timeline. You are not the lesson. You are the background noise to the moral of the story. The ghost inside the statistic. The cautionary tale they no longer bother to repeat. Your silence has been absorbed into the city's foundation, tamped down, sealed over, and deemed structurally sound. The building holds. Seattle thrives. The trains run on time. The market stalls overflow with fresh produce. The ferry whistles echo across Elliott Bay, and children point at the skyline as if it was always this tall, as if it grew out of the ground without any cost. A man in a polished suit passes a corner where someone once traded a coat lining for a pipe, and he doesn't know it. A mother pushes a stroller over the same patch of brick where your breath once curled into the cold night air. The city hums around them, clean and orderly and full of forward motion. You are not a scar on its surface. You're not even a wrinkle. You are a line that has been erased from a map that no one reads anymore. And that would be fine, almost poetic in its own sad way, if it weren't for one thing. They still build fortunes on addiction. And now, as our story fades, the sharp edges of the city begin to soften and blur. The gaslights flicker and dim, giving way to a deeper, more restful dark. The sounds of the street, the rattling carts, the distant shouts, the lonely whistle of the train, all recede, melting into a gentle, quiet hum. The cold dampness of the alley floor is replaced by the warmth and comfort of your own bed. The ache in your bones eases, the tightness in your chest loosens, and the weight of a life forgotten is lifted from your shoulders. You are no longer on the run, no longer hiding in the shadows. You are safe now, and you are still. There is no pipe waiting for you, only the soft and quiet promise of sleep. The city and its ghosts can rest now, their stories told, their struggles finally over. Let the silence be a comfort, a deep and dreamless peace that settles over you like freshly fallen snow, covering everything in a blanket of pure, quiet white. Let the last of the tension leave your body with each slow, easy breath. Just breathe, and drift, and sleep.